White House officials are strategizing on how President Trump should address the issue of affordability. Remember, back when he was a candidate, Trump repeatedly vowed to make America affordable again. But now, as president, he's repeatedly dismissed affordability as a problem, insisting that the economy is great. Sources tell CNN that Trump's advisors are telling him that is a bad idea, that he should not downplay the fact that Americans feel squeezed by rising prices. They've even discussed having him travel the country to give economy-focused speeches. So what do the numbers and the data actually show? CNN's Daniel Dale is here with a fact check. Daniel, let's go overall prices first. Here is what President Trump has said.
If you look at affordability, which they campaigned on, they lied because they talked about, oh, prices are up. No, prices are down under the Trump administration, and they're down substantially. The reason I don't want to talk about affordability is because everybody knows that it's far less expensive under Trump than it was under Sleepy Joe Biden, and the prices are way down.
Daniel, what do the numbers say?
None of that is true, Boris. Prices are up during this administration. There has been inflation every month of this administration. Moreover, the pace of inflation has accelerated now for 5 consecutive months. It hit 3% in September, so prices in September were 3% higher than they were a year prior, and they were 1.7% higher than they were in January, the month that President Trump returned to office. Now, he keeps saying that every single price is down. I think the overall numbers show that is clearly not true, and I think Americans know that. If you look at the CPI, Consumer Price Index data, it'll show you that thousands of individual products have increased in price since President Trump returned to the White House.
Here's what he said about grocery store prices.
Beef we have to get down, but we've got prices way down.
You think prices are coming down from this?
I believe that, yeah. I think they're coming down, but I think they're down already.
Our groceries are way down. Everything is way down. And the press doesn't report it. The press reports whatever the con people say. You know, I call the Democrats con men and women. They make up numbers.
Just to be clear, Daniel, what are grocery prices like, and are these numbers made up?
They are made up, Boris. So grocery prices as well are up since President Trump returned to office. They were up 1.4% since January. They were up 2.7% compared to a year prior. Grocery prices are up in 5 of the 6 overarching categories of products that are tracked by the Consumer Price Index. Now, President Trump keeps saying it's only beef that's up. Yes, beef has experienced one of the biggest increases, but it's far from only beef. Again, far more products in the grocery aisle have increased than decreased. Other big risers include coffee and bananas, 2 products that are heavily imported in the U.S. and thus are subject to President Trump's major tariffs on those items.
Yeah, the president also frequently touts energy prices as going down. What does the cost of gas look like?
Yeah, so he said 2 things last week on this subject that weren't true either. So he said that gas is just a bit above $2. The national average is above $3. It's about a 307. 308 at this moment. Second of all, he said that gas prices have plummeted to the lowest level in 2 decades. First of all, they haven't plummeted. As of today, they are just about identical to what they were a year ago today, about $3.08, according to AAA. Maybe they've increased a fraction of a cent if you go to multiple decimal places, but at least near identical. And second, it's clearly not the lowest in 2 decades. Not only was it lower during, of course, the COVID pandemic when demand crashed, not only was it lower at various points in the 2010s and the 2000s, it was also lower on various days this year in January under President Biden. So both parts of that claim just not true, just like most of President Trump's claims about prices these days are just not true either.
Daniel Dale, thank you so much for walking us through that fact check.
Our money lead now, with the federal government shutdown seemingly on the verge of ending, seemingly. Wall Street closed last hour with the Dow above 48,000 for the very first time. The S&P 500 showing some minor gains, the NASDAQ dropping. Joining us now to discuss all of this, financial journalist Andrew Ross Sorkin. You may recognize him from CNBC, and he, of course, just wrote a new book getting critically acclaimed, great reviews. It's called 1929, Inside the Greatest Crash in Wall Street History and How It Shattered a Nation. Andrew, your book details the U.S. economy before the 1929 market crash leading to the Depression. You warn, in your view, today's stock market mirrors conditions in 29. So do you think we're indeed on track for some sort of crash, and how soon?
I don't know if we have to have a crash per se, but I do think that there's a lot of things going on in the economy today that look a lot like the late 20s, potentially look like the late 90s. And so invariably that means that we're likely to have some form of a correction. How big a correction and how deep is always the big question. And when? It's one thing to be a Cassandra and say this is all going to happen. It's another to be able to say it's going to happen tomorrow. I don't think it's going to happen necessarily tomorrow. I think actually this could play out for a little bit longer, in part because so much money is coursing through our economy in the flow of artificial intelligence investments, and that doesn't seem like it's going to abate for any time. The real question, of course, is whether at some point all of these folks that are pouring all this money into this space can continue to afford to do that, and that's when the rubber potentially could meet the road.
So 10 days ago, I interviewed Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, and I asked if he thinks that we are heading for a recession. Here's part of what he had to say.
I think that there are sectors of the economy that are in recession, and the Fed has caused a lot of distributional problems with their policies. If the Fed brings down mortgage rates, then they can end this housing recession.
What are your thoughts?
Look, I don't know if we're headed towards a recession. I assume he was also referring to potentially what the government shutdown could do now that that is hopefully going to be over soon and fixed. I don't know if we get into a recession. I do think we have a real conundrum, and he, of course, the administration would like lower interest rates. The conundrum is we have an employment picture that's getting weaker. That part is demonstrably true. And so you'd think you'd want the Federal Reserve to try to prop that up by lowering rates. But it's not clear that that would actually do the trick in this case, because the reason we're losing jobs is much more complicated than that. And at the same time, you have inflation, which has been persistent. Now, the inflation picture is coming down a little bit. They're sort of decelerating, but prices are still elevated, and especially in food and a lot of items that we all know about. When you go to the store, you know that they're more expensive than they used to be. And so if you wanted to get that problem, you'd want to raise interest rates to push the price. So right. The problem is you're sort of stuck if you're the Federal Reserve, and you're stuck to some degree if you're this administration in this moment.
A new AP poll suggests that 67% of the American people are not happy with President Trump's handling of the economy. Now, President Trump has said that these polls are fake. He claims that prices are way down. Meanwhile, obviously, inflation is up. Most grocery prices are up. Fewer first-time home buyers. The president's floating this 50-year mortgage as an option to save money. What is your response to this 50-year mortgage idea?
Look, I mean, conceptually, the argument is that it should allow people who can't afford a home to get into a home at a lower monthly cost. The conundrum is it doesn't really lower the price of housing. Right now, the problem we have in this country is a supply problem. That is the fundamental problem. And the other problem is if you extend out that loan for 50 years, first of all, there's a lifetime issue. But beyond that, there's just the fundamental question of when the 50 years are up, or even if you were to own the home for 30 years, it could be that the first 20 or 30 years, you're getting no value from all of the money that you're putting in because it's basically just interest payments. So it doesn't really change the dynamic of the housing situation and potentially could create a whole bunch of other problems.
Andrew Ross Sorkin, thanks so much. It was fun to be able to pick your brain and steal you from CNBC for a second.
Jake, this was
once
fun.
again,
Thank
his
you.
new book. His new book, it's critically acclaimed. It's selling all over the place. It's called 1929, Inside the Greatest Crash in Wall Street History and How It Shattered a Nation. The great Andrew Ross Sorkin. Thank you so much. Great to have you on the show. Everybody go buy his book.